Before the sun has even risen, it's clear that it's going to be a long day. Varley ascends the tower and scouts out the enemy forces through his looking glass. He makes a full report for the various commanders. Bjornsson and his camp have mobilized. The throngs of dynamites are supported by 1,000 Svards and Krigars, and at least 100 mounted Svardic elites, dozens of Bearsarks, Bjornsson himself, and what's left of his personal champions. What's left of the Bristearfech are now being supported by at least a dozen Bearsark warriors, and several times that number of Svards and Krigar warriors. Still, the smallest force overall. But he believes the Bearsarks will make short work of the barricades that have been piled in the North Gate breach. The southern camp has grown as well, and has formed a very broad encirclement to the south. Varley counted dozens of crude ladders and at least one battering ram. He believes this means that they aim to simultaneously scale the south wall and also breach one of the main gates. His bet is on the western gate, the furthest from the breach and the most awkward to defend. He's also pretty sure that he spotted Olaf One-Eye in command of the southern force. And, if all of this is not enough, Varley says that Bjornsson is now attended by another retinue. A few dozen Svardic elites with cloaks dyed dark green, led by a hard-looking man in mail. He has long, tangled hair and a similar beard, both adorned with some sort of ribbons, or perhaps seaweed, and a few others that roughly match their leader in dress and manner. Vlari priests, no doubt, but Yoren dislikes the description of the lead priest so much that he scales the tower. He looks for himself. He confirms that it is in fact the high priest, Hakon, the one that took Elena. Alexander armors up and gets ready. His ribs still ache, but he's feeling well enough to fight. Agrippa's wound treatment and long-term care abilities allow him to provide a much more rapid turnaround for HP recovery at this point. Almost fast enough to look something like traditional D&D, though. Not really. It's still measured in days, rather than minutes or hours, but our system also has injuries which still take time to heal and cause various negative effects. So, even though Alexander is at or near full HP, he's far from 100%. Not that he gives a shit. If Hakon is out there, he's going to be ready. He gives an order to the ballista team, the archers, even the cavalry. He wants Hakon taken alive. Alexander gives the order with such authority, not to mention vehemence, that nobody thinks to wonder whether or not he is actually able to give them orders. Wigglesworth says nothing to countermand this order either. Even Lord Beck nods in assent, no protest given. The ballista team couldn't kill Hakon if they wanted to, as they are still struggling to repair the damage dealt. Nate and Jaspar struggle alone for the moment, as Ignis is still in the infirmary recovering from several knife wounds. The precursor to this battle, this time, is the priests. It's the rising chant last heard at Wealding. Hakon and his priests have dragged a captive Cadian out onto the field and eviscerated him, and now they've harnessed his ebbing lifeblood to power a Vlari ritual. Waves of unease radiate out from the priests, slowly turning to terror. Hubert speaks words of encouragement to the assembled army, trying to keep them calm, but he is just one man with just one once-per-session ability to mitigate stuff like this, and the priests keep chanting. Another Cadian prisoner is brought forth and sacrificed, and the terror builds. The Svards stand ready, all but a few Dynamite peasants out of bow range, waiting for the fear to build. The Cadians all assume their posts. Bold brothers in the breach, sons and Steelshod split between the breaches, the vulnerable gate, the walls, cavalry inside the keep, ready to rotate between hot zones. Finally, the horns. The various factions begin charging the keep. In the background, the Vlari priests continue their rituals. Sure enough, the southern force splits into two. 8 Bearsarks rush sharpened tree trunk to the western gate. Svards throw ladders against the southern and western walls, trying to scale it as quickly as possible. In the north, the Bearsarks rush the barricade with an even cruder ram, a small sapling held by a few Bearsarks. The others smash the barricades with axes. The barricade is no wall. It won't last long. Many Svards supplement the dynamite rabble this time, pressing the main gap harder than ever before. Bjornsson holds his men in reserve to the north, protecting the priests, watching how the breaches are resolved. Alexander is itching to sortie out an attack, but he has too few available men, and the southern and northern forces are beginning to meet, encircling the entire keep. Varley, in the reserve with Wigglesworth and Alexander, observes that this probably is what he would do. They have the numbers, and the expendable troops, and Kilchester is as porous as a sieve at this point. He's been warning of this possibility for days. Everybody knows the signals to retreat into the inner keep if it comes to that. As the battle rages on, it's not looking good. Svards in the south are wary of the bell, and don't lose too many men to it. They still struggled to take the wall, until a group of Vartrors scale one of the southeastern towers, kill the Cadian archers posted there, and begin raining down arrows on the defenders from atop the wall. Yoren calls a partial retreat, pulling men off the south wall and consolidating at the southwestern tower and the west wall. But the west wall is struggling as well. The gate buckles under the ram, and Yoren uses another alchemical pot Hubert prepared for him. He draws out a vial of slick oil. As far as alchemicals go, a vial of super slippery oil may not sound like much, and leave it to a hedonistic lecher like Hubert to invent the world's greatest lube. But when Yoren shatters the vial onto the ram, the Bearsarks find that slippery oil a difficult problem indeed. A brief comedy of errors ensues as the Bearsarks struggle to lift and use the ram under sustained archer fire, eventually giving up and falling back. In the north, the Bearsarks smash the barricade, and the assembled defenders quake as nearly a score of enormous Bearsarks charge through the breach. But despite the magical fear, and the mundane one of facing such brutes, Gwyneth Carver and the Sons of Victory hold the line. Axe against axe, the Bearsarks outweigh and outreach the average Sun by hundreds of pounds and several feet, and it shows as Suns begin dropping left and right. As the Bearsarks clear space, the Unkar and Svards pour in behind them, until Harold Butterman, one of Gwyneth's lieutenants, rallies a wing of the defense. An unfailingly polite gentleman, the others jokingly call Master Butterman, Harold and the 5 other sons push past the Bearsarks and move to plug the gate. Wigglesworth and many of his knights arrive before the suns break completely. They hedge the Bearsarks in, hammering the beastly fighters as hard as they can. Yoren, constantly rotating around the top of the wall, shows up just as Master Butterman's stand is starting to break. He grabs his last alchemical pot, the one Hubert told him to be extra careful with, and drops it into the breach. An eruption of liquid fire douses the Svards and Unkar trying to break through Butterman's line. The north gate was a postern gate, smaller than usual. For the moment, the fire fills the space utterly, consuming a dozen enemy and holding the rest at bay. Meanwhile at the gap, the line is being sorely pressed. The Bold Brotherhood have suffered huge casualties over the days of fighting, as have Wigglesworth's conscripts. The Glacial have been stuck into the battle lines here, uneasily standing shoulder to shoulder with Cadians they were fighting just the other day. And now, with the Vlari fear beating down on them, morale is plummeting. Alexander and Beck use their forces to plug the holes that keep forming. A force of Ter Bjornsson's elites cut a hole through the line, led by Stein the Butcher. But, in the midst of the fray, the Butcher meets the farmers. Leona and Miles, lowborn, grew up working farms in their respective homelands. Stein is a huge man, and he throws and swings a series of axes, pressing them both, but Leona dances around him, whittling him down with quick blows from her spear, and Miles hammers him with his mace. Pierre Lenoir is on the battle lines as well. He sees an opening, and hooks Stein's feet out from under him. For a famed champion, Stein dies unceremoniously. No epic duel, no final curse or epithet. He's just brought to the ground and butchered. The Cadians in Steelshod win many small victories like that, but the battle for Kilchester is waging on too many fronts. and there are too many holes. Alexander knows they're losing. Torbjornsson and Hakon are still far away, watching from the reserve, out of reach. The south and eastern walls have been lost, and the Sfards are dangerously close to opening the east gate, adding another front to the battle lines around the breach. And though the western gate has held, the wall is pressed from the south as well as by ladders, and won't hold much longer. While the battle rages around the north gate, Yoren has evacuated the ballista tower. They managed to repair it, enough to get in a few shots, but it's still breaking after every other shot. They sabotage it, leave it behind. Wigglesworth made himself clear. Give ground. Don't fight to the last. The inner keep is, in some respects, even more defensible than the outer walls, and a lot less square feet to cover. So, the men in the breach and the northern gate begin a fighting retreat. Agrippa delays abandoning the triage tent until the last minute. Alexander, Beck, and the other cavalry are deep in the thick of the fighting at the breach. As the line falls back, their cavalry take up the final line of defense, fighting and retreating fast enough that they can lose the pursuing Sfards. Near the east gate of the inner keep, Alexander sees Beck 30 feet away, with a handful of his knights. From the throng of foes, a javelin sails through the air, and explodes into fragments against Beck's breastplate. The spear-breaker has come. Jorg is far away, out of reach, but he hurls a javelin at Alexander as well. Alexander shifts in his saddle, taking a glancing blow across his plate. Even amidst the wild melee, Alexander sees Beck struggling on the ground, still very much alive. And he sees a familiar grizzled old Sfard push his way through the crowd. The Sfard doesn't look like much. Just an ugly old man with a bushy beard and a gaping hole where one eye should be. But he brandishes an axe with a steel head. Olaf One Eye, Jorg's father. Beck struggles to regain his footing, but Olaf plants a boot against the Cadian lord's chest and slams him back down, and cleaves off his head in a single swift stroke. It wasn't a fight, but an execution. But there's no time for vengeance. More Sfards, Bearsarks, and Dynamite Knights are pursuing. Alexander and the rest of Steelshod fight their way up to the inner keep and withdraw beyond its walls. Hubert uses the last of his dragon fire to clear enough ground for them to slam shut the gates. The Sfards batter the walls and gates for a moment, but it's just to intimidate. They have no more rams or ladders with them, at least for the moment. And between Steelshod members like Ben, Amos, and Kara, the Glacial hunters, and the Cadian longbowmen, the army massing below the inner keep's walls is taking casualties with every passing moment. Torbjornsson sounds another retreat. This time the Sfards fall back to the outer walls, the edges of the Kilchester grounds. Torbjornsson moves his camp up to just outside the gap in the outer wall, and he waits. Chatsworth made it off the western wall alive. He and Wigglesworth are the only two High Lords still standing, battle-ready. The Sons of Victory were devastated by the fighting, down from 50 men to barely a dozen still standing. The Bold Brotherhood and the Dusk Riders have seen serious casualties as well. Korlankan jokes that he may have bet on the wrong side. Nobody laughs. Still, when they hold another strategy meeting, Varley offers some optimism. Torbjornsson expected to take Kilchester in the first day of fighting, and it's dragged on for over a week. That alone is a victory. Moreover, the fighting will only get more brutal for his side if he tries to storm the inner keep. With no breach to take advantage of, they will be fully reliant on ladders and rams. And if they try to siege, they will lose more time. Wigglesworth's army brought a good amount of supplies, stored in the inner keep. They should be able to last another few weeks at least, whereas Torbjornsson's army is likely already suffering from dysentery and dealing with tainted food stores. Varley believes that they can hold out and survive, and the longer they tie up the army here, the longer the rest of Cadia can rally. Sooner or later, Marshall will receive the messages they've sent, that Torbjornsson is here, with a large host. Whether they die or not, they will not die in vain. Easy to say when you're an old man pushing 90. Nobody else wants to die. The keep sleeps uneasily that night. In the morning, no attack is forthcoming. The Svards begin digging in around Kilchester. True to Varley's prediction, several more days pass in siege. No major attacks, just a few probes. Change comes from an unexpected source. Yorin and Alexander are called up to the wall. They arrive in time to see, through Varley's looking-glass, that something is happening in Ter Bjornsson's camp. Hakon and his retinue of elites and priests have mounted up. Ter Bjornsson stands in front of the high priest of Vlar. They are clearly arguing. Hakon is angry. Ter Bjornsson seems annoyed, perhaps. As ever, his emotional state seems subdued compared to most. But he is not happy. Finally, Hakon declares something, and waves Ter Bjornsson away, and he and his retinue begin riding south, away from the camp. Alexander and Yorin exchange looks. It doesn't even need to be said. If Hakon is leaving, then so is Steelshod. One way or another. Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the PayPal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the MostlyRights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.